So it is now 1 p.m. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luis. I will be your facilitator alongside with DeLong. Just a few reminders that this meeting is being recorded. Sorry, this session is being recorded and your attendance is being tracked. I'd like to welcome you to this breakout session titled Working with Formerly Incarcerated Students on a College Campus. And our presenters are Mark McNiff and Monique Reyna.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you guys for being here with us. I am excited to share this space with Mark. I'm excited. We'll go ahead and just jump on in here and get started. So this presentation is tailored more specifically to Fresno City College, where we both work. So a lot of the resources that we're talking about are resources that are on Fresno City College campus. But if you're interested in kind of finding out about resources on other campuses or within the community, you can always reach out to us after this presentation, and we'd be happy to connect you with them. Oh. Okay. So jumping on in then, so when we're talking about, who are these students, I think it's important to remember that they are our everyday student. There is no one particular indicator that definitively states, oh, the student belongs to this particular population. So I think it's important starting to dismiss a lot of the misconceptions that come with when we talk about formerly incarcerated students. A lot of time people think, oh, they all look a certain way or talk a certain way, or because they were incarcerated, they must be criminals. All of this not only kind of hurts the community that we belong in, Fresno City College, but also our position and the relationship that we have with students. So when we talk about like, well, how do we serve these students? I think it starts off with you serve them like you would any other student. You offer your support, you answer questions, you connect them with resources and people that they need to know on campus. And once you started to build that relationship, then students will become more comfortable and open to kind of talk about anything that has to do with, a background that they may have. But it starts with having that relationship, nobody's going to come and go up to somebody and be like, hey, I was arrested a couple of years ago. Can you help me with these things? Like, it starts with just first establishing that relationship and kind of any way you would with any other student. And again, once that bond or once that relationship has been established, then a student will be more comfortable to be like, okay, I ran into some issues a couple of years ago. I want to work on cleaning up my record. Do you know anybody that can help me? Or, for this reason, I don't qualify for financial aid or Pell Grants. Do you know any other way that I can get connected to, financial resources on campus? And so, I think that the one thing that I just really want to share with this slide is that it all starts with making sure that there's a connection between us and the position that we have and the students that we serve. Mark, you want to add?
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I always look at when we work across our campus, I always get nervous before I do these things. So one of my filters is to go on a walk, and I'm walking across the campus today. And one of the first things you notice is like, we're in a community of 26,000 people. And this campus is a city within a city. Our population is almost probably the size of Fowler. So it's very interesting when I walk across and think that, well, who is it that we're serving? And what does this population look like? And Monique did hit on it. Well, you really couldn't differentiate a lot of our students who have been formerly incarcerated from a regular student. There is absolutely that 1 or 2% of the students that we're helping that the minute you look at or the minute they walk in the room, you think, oh my goodness, that's incarceration. And it could be the full bulldog tattoo on their head. It could be, just the gang affiliation stuff. And we tend to think, well, that's what they all look like, or that's who we're serving. And it's really, that's who we tend to point out, but it's such a small population of who is that we're really serving. But yeah, that's there. I mean, I walk across this campus too. We do have that population of students that the minute they walk in, you think, uh-oh, I'm going to go to the other side of the sidewalk. And interesting enough, it all comes down to within, whether it be incarceration, foster youth, at risk, any student walks on our campus, what does your front door service look like? When they walk into admissions and records, how does that counter person react? When they go to financial aid, when they have to go to the web room, our front entry service on this campus is one of the most vital services for returning students, and especially students that are scared to death to be here. And it doesn't really necessarily have to be incarceration. It can be that single mom that's finally coming back to school with the 3 kids. It's been told you're dumb your whole life, and all of a sudden she shows up at our doorstep, and the first person she meets makes her feel dumb, or makes her feel that they don't belong or don't understand what they're doing.
Sorry, Mark,
Oh.
you're muted.
Yeah, there you go.
You missed that whole thing?
No, not all of it.
Oh, it
Just like the
massage-
last 2 seconds of it.
Okay, but it really does come down to the front door service, and how are we providing that? And you know, and one of the biggest recruitment things, and a lot of things that Monique and I would get calls with back in the day when we would have the assessment center, because every single student had to go through the assessment center. And a student has been out of the system for years, or hasn't been in education for, sometimes they've been locked down for 15 years. All of a sudden to be told you have to take a test would be like this terrifying thing. And now that they're no longer have to do that, we found that to be a little easier on the front door, but it comes down like financial aid and the disclosure of, well, what do you mean you haven't worked for 15 years? What have you been doing? Their income hasn't been so good as of late. So a lot of the times it's, how do we approach on the front side of the student to get them to feel comfortable and welcome? And it's not just the incarcerated student, it's the entire family. It's all of our students, because when you look at our population, and our night population is a lot older than the day. It just is. And there really isn't a clear-cut demographic of what a college student looks like anymore. One of the things that Monique and I have noticed immediately is the prison system is broken at a system we've never seen. There are more releases into our community than we've ever seen. The amount of people that have extreme long-term jail sentences, we have students that are doing 4 and 5 years in jail. They're not even being shipped to a prison anymore. So the releases that are coming back into our community, this is the biggest group of releases we've ever seen. So within Monique's job at CalWORKs and mine here, we're seeing long-term students. The students that we're seeing that are being released now are students that can have a 15 to 25 year sentence. When I first started this job, I've been doing it now for 35 years. It was very odd that we would get a student that had more than a 3 or 4 year sentence. Now we're getting lifers. And you look at the amount of technology. If I were to tell you right now, go back 15 years, go back 20 years, go back 25 years, and the technology that you're using today and what was available to you then, they're coming into a system now with technology that they can't even fathom. And it's the front service in our lab when they come and they register. Or how do you apply to the college when they go into the computer lab? Is it welcoming, or are we just saying, go get, here's your slip, go get on computer 34 and log on? And it can be, it's overwhelming. And one of the things that I'm really proud of what happens at this college is the recognition that the staff has of a student that is so scared they can't imagine themselves being here. And all of a sudden they're like, they found the courage to come down and apply. And I think that's the hardest thing when Monique and I meet with students who have been formerly incarcerated, is they don't think that they belong. I can't go to Fresno City College. We'll say, well, why can you not? I was in prison. I have a record. I can't go. And we're like, well, what do you mean you can't go? Why can't you go? You're a part of our community. When it says Fresno City College, you're part of the city. You're part of us. It is community. Everyone in the community is welcome. Are you 18? Yes. Do you come? You're welcome. But how do we serve them? And then Monique, I'm sure you can expand on that, on the how the students sometimes don't feel that they belong here, or they're so overwhelmed at the front door service. How could you add to that?
Yeah, and it's overwhelming for multiple different reasons. One of them starting off with, when you grow up in a lot of these areas that tend to lead to incarceration, you don't have people within that community that you see that went to college and came back. Your neighbor is not a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, or someone in that profession. And so for one is that you've never seen anybody within your community kind of obtain this and go to college. So then a lot of times students have this idea, like, if no one around me has ever done it, what makes me think that I can do it? And then in addition to that, there's just all these other kind of stereotypes associated with it, like, oh, since you've been incarcerated, like, that's not for you. This whole realm of academic is only for professional or rich people. There's a lot of ideas. Even myself, growing up, I never assumed that I was going to attend college, so I never even bothered taking the SATs or any of that, because my thing was, as soon as I was done with high school, I needed to go to work. I needed to start contributing and putting food on the table. So when life changes, and so when I did come to college, I questioned every single day. Every single day I questioned, why am I here? And so Mark talked about, the front door service, and I think that was extremely important for me as well. When I started to come to school, is just feeling accepted, being reassured that this is a place that you belong. Um, and whatever you need, we're here to support you. And I got a lot of that support from the EOP office, from Mark. That's actually where I met him, and that relationship continues to today. And so I apologize, my dog doesn't like mailman, and so she's a little wild right now, so I do apologize for that. But kind of going back to that whole front door service, I remember being walking around campus, and I have a shirt that says Fresno City College staff, and I have tattoos, which makes me a little more approachable to certain population of students. So I had a student come up to me and asking me the basic questions, and in the beginning I was thinking, like, how do you not know these things? These are just simple things. But of course I didn't say that. I went ahead and with patience I answered every single question. I walked them to different areas on campus and let them know, like, hey, this is where you would do this, so this is where you would do that. And it must have taken over an hour to just answer a lot of these basic questions. But because I had done that, and because I had shown patience, and because I had shown this student, like, hey, I'm here to support you, that's all it took, was a little more than an hour for that student to open up and, like, okay, well, actually I just got out, and people were encouraging me to come to school, and that's why I wanted to come and check it out. And he started asking me questions, related to that, like, does it matter what I was, incarcerated for? Can I still come to school? What work, and so, I helped them after that, and gave them all of the information that they needed, and let them know where they can start, let them know about Mark and Rising Scholars. But again, it kind of just started with, how would you serve any other student on campus? You would be patient with them. You would answer their questions. You, again, would be there to show them that you support them. And so when we're talking about, like, well, how do we serve formerly incarcerated students? You do it the same way, and you allow them to open up to you about, hey, this happened a couple of years ago. Do you have any resources that can help me with that?
Yeah, I always try to draw on anything that was a personal experience with me. And the whole concept of college and my family, it wasn't something that we did. You absolutely didn't do it. My parents are immigrants. We moved to the United States to work. So the measure of success is, do you have a job? And I can remember when I applied to Fresno City College, I literally made it as far as Bulldog Donut Shop. For all you old guys that have been here for a while, the old Bulldog Donut Shop in front of Ratcliffe. I didn't have the courage to walk on the college campus, because the fact that all of you really scared me to death and intimidated me, because college was something that other people got to do, but not us. And I couldn't imagine walking on campus and having people that were so smart walking around. I had this envision that you guys are going to be working and going here, and you're going to have this stack of books, and you're going to be with your tweed jacket. And here I was, not having an understanding, or having parents or anyone in my family getting out of the fourth grade. it was really overwhelming. And about the fourth week in a row, I made it to Bulldog Donut Shop. And I finally just said, I got to walk on this campus. I got to see what it is. And then walking across the campus and seeing what a college student looked like, it kind of changed. I'm like, this guy looks just like me. There's no difference. But when you come from a background of non-education and you try to immerse yourself into education, it's really intimidating. And it's not just incarcerated we talk to, it's our foster youth, it's our single parent, it's the person that finally got enough courage to walk onto the college campus. It really comes down to is that they're scared to death and they just want to fit in and they just want to try to find their space. And it's very difficult sometimes to fit in when you have chosen to have a full head tattoo, when you have colors, when you still have the Wasco walk about you, and you're doing things that don't look like all the other college students. It's difficult for them to kind of matriculate into this system or try to figure it out. And one of the points that Monique and I don't know if it's on the next slide, is the who are these students going to approach? Who's the most likely person to deal with an at-risk college student or someone that's scared to be here? And I'm gonna let Monique kind of expand on that and I'll jump in, but it's like not only front door service, but who are they going to approach?
Yeah, and so one of the things that Mark and I wanted to touch on is key information and resources that should trickle every direction on campus, up and down and sideways. And so I think that this is something that we definitely can do a better job in doing. Fresno City College offers so many amazing resources here on campus. We have different programs. We have different people here on campus. But a lot of the times that information isn't evenly distributed to everybody. And so although people in one area are familiar with, rising scholars and every single thing about them, there are other people on campus that perhaps don't know much about it or just have the basic information. So when we talk about, and so resources is important. And the reason that it's important for it to trickle across, up and down and across in the college campus is because when we're thinking about who are students more likely to approach, a lot of times in our experience from the students that Mark and I have talked to, they're more likely to approach a lot of the guys that are working in building services or people that are part of the custodial team, because this is who they feel more comfortable approaching rather than somebody that they see in a suit and tie and someone that they see with these fancy shoes or that person looks really professional. Even myself, I've worked here on Fresno City College campus over 4.5 years. And sometimes I'm intimidated in meetings to, say something that I need to say, depending on who's in that room, because I always have to be, mindful of, am I gonna articulate my words eloquently enough, or, what are they gonna think of my role here on campus because of all the tattoos that I have, or, because this is still something that I deal with. And so if it's something that, I ask myself or I question of myself, I can only imagine what our students are going through. And so it's a lot easier and way more comfortable to kind of go up to somebody in building service and be like, hey, do you know where this building's at? Or, hey, do you by chance know where this office is at? And for that reason, it's extremely important that everyone on campus be familiar with at least the key resources that and programs that students tend to need. And so we have listed on here some, but this is only a very minimal fraction of what Fresno City College offers. But in our experience, both Mark and I and the students that we work with, usually what students tend to need the most help with tends to kind of fall in lines with these programs. And, Rand Pantry does an amazing job in all the food that they distribute to students. And especially right now with the pandemic and being at home, that's something that I tend to kind of let students know about the most is like, hey, go and get your groceries from here. I know how much kids eat, like, trust me, go and get your groceries. But other programs as well, I don't know how many times Mark and I have connected students to each other, like, hey, this student qualifies for CalWORKs, or hey, this student qualifies for EOP. And so more than just knowing these services on campus, I think that it's important for all of us that we work on a college campus to also establish relationships with other people in these programs and with other departments. Because it's one thing to let a student know, oh, you can contact this office and they'll help you out. And it's another thing to personally walk a student to that office, introduce them to an actual person and be like, hey, this is Mark. He's a great friend of mine. He's going to go ahead and take care of you and let you know how to get started here in EOP, you know, and hand them off. Students not only feel more confident and comfortable, but they're more likely then to continue on with whatever it is that they were needing. You know, when you tell students, oh, like, go ahead and just call this office, a lot of times, again, students get intimidated. They're like, I'm not sure what to ask, or, you know, what these people are going to think of me. You know what? I just won't call. So that's kind of some of the things that we wanted to highlight with this. And I know Mark has more to add.
Yeah, you know, it's the campus does so many things right. It's remarkable. And some of the things that there's a little bit of a disconnect that we see, like, hey, we need to fix, you know, and we know that our at-risk populations are students that are scared to be here. They're going to look for someone familiar. They're going to look someone that they can identify with. And a lot of times it is that custodial staff, or it is the groundskeeper, or it is someone in a cart, or it's absolutely our front desk people. When they walk in, they find their way. They just happen to find the door at the school of business, and they open it. It's the person at the front desk that it very seldom is it a dean or some of the higher hierarchy we have on the campus. A lot of times it is that person. And one of the disconnects that we have is, like, when we turned our maintenance group into district employees, and they're not Fresno City, it's not so much so Fresno City College employees, they don't have an opportunity to go to these trainings, or they don't get to know the services, because one day they're in Clovis, the next day it might be Madera, it might be Oakhurst. So there's a move around, but they're literally probably answer more questions than any other employee on campus. And the same with some of our custodial staff. And when we do these trainings and we go to stuff and we look to see who's attending, a lot of the people that absolutely have to have this information, or at least know how to truthfully give it out, or at least give a roadmap to services, or saying, hey, this is what we do. This is who you need to go see. And Monique expanded on something that absolutely needs. The worst thing is a college, or as an employee, or someone that really cares, can do is point. Pointing is absolutely the most not I don't care signal we have. If a student comes to me and they say, hey, where's the library? And they're literally, it's across from them. To point and say it's right there kind of just makes them feel like, oh, well, geez, but to say, you know what, let me show you. Let me walk you over. And I know we're overwhelmed. I would much rather be 20 minutes late for your meeting and help a student than to have to set in another meeting that I'm probably not going to say anything in anyway. It's just the fact that if we can hand deliver and walk them in, and when you hit it right on the head, when I would take students in to apply to the college, and I know that they're scared, and I know that they don't want to get on a computer, but if I can walk them to the front staff and say, hey, this is my brother, he's applying today, and he's not super great on the computer, can you just watch out for him and make them feel welcome? That student's coming back tomorrow. If I point and say, it's over there, it's the sliding doors, over this, the second set of doors, go through the sliders and immediately hang a left, and you're going to go in and they're going to ask you some stuff, I'm probably going to lose the student. They may or may not come back because they walked out there, they spun around, they looked at it, and it gave them one more reason to figure out why they shouldn't be here. When it took me 3 minutes to walk them over, introduce them, and say they'd like to do this. And I know as a staff, we're overwhelmed. And I know that there's going to be times that you can't do that, but put yourself in that, in the students' shoes, and understanding just how overwhelmed and freaked out they are. One of the the things that I do in this office that just, I'll get a student that comes in, been incarcerated for a long time. They'll apply to the college. We'll get their financial aids in order now. We're literally to the point now where I'm putting them in classes. We put them in classes, and this celebration that you're now a college student, and they're always excited about it. And I said, whoa, 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 hey, hold up, man, you ain't going nowhere. Like what? And I said, get on the phone. I said, call somebody that loves you as a human being. And I don't care who it is. It can be grandma, it could be your mama. I don't care who it is. Get on the phone and you call them and you tell them that today you're a college student. And they'll make the phone call and they'll just start bawling. It's like, man, I cannot believe it. I'm in college. I'm not calling you. I'm not hitting you up for money. I'm not hitting you up for a ride. I'm not hitting you up for anything. I'm in college. Powerful. What a great statement for a human being to make. I'm in college, especially when you know they're scared to death to be here. So it's such a small thing that becomes a big thing. And it's just cool. So it's just like the pointing. As an institution, we can't point. We direct, we lead. We mentor, we allow them to feel crazy. And it's funny because, you know, when I worked in the bookstore, and I had a student walking around one day, and the guy's just mindlessly walking around. So I stopped and I said, hey man, what are you doing? Are you okay? I said, so what can I help you with? What are you looking for? He's in the textbook section. He says, man, I'm looking for a blue book. I'm like, a what? He says, I'm looking for a blue book. And it finally hit me that his instructor, he was taking an exam. His instructor told him he had to go find a mini or a large blue book to take his exam. And he was too scared to ask, what's that mean? Well, what's a Scantron 882 NES? What's this 8846-3912 I gotta have? What is all this stuff? And he was so overwhelmed at not being able to ask for the feel of being pointed out and feeling stupid what a large blue book was. This dude's walking in the textbook area looking for a blue book. And it's like, no, man, hold on. We gotta work this out. This is what this means. And to take the time to show them what that means. And there's just example after example. You know, last semester, I had a student come in and he wanted to drop all of his classes. I have to drop, I can't be here. I said, well, what's the matter? I can't be here, man. I can't do this. Mark, I can't do this. I said, well, why can't you do this? The hardest part's over. You had the courage to be here. What do you mean you can't do this? He says, bro, my instructor told me I got to put my assignment on a thumb drive. So yeah. And dude's literally looking at his thumb. He goes, what the hell's a thumb drive? What is this? And he literally was so overwhelmed at that statement of put your assignment on this thumb drive so you can turn it in, that it was overwhelming enough for him to want to just toss it all in. And it was just like, no, hold on, man, hold on. I'm going to take you to the computer lab because my boy Troy is working today. And Troy was formerly incarcerated. He worked in the computer lab, and he's just this big mountain of a man. And guys would look at him and they would immediately, he just looked, I didn't have to introduce anyone to Troy. He just looked at him and he knew when they walked in. He'd just say, hey man, let's go for a walk, hold on. And this was a student aide. This was a student worker that would just say, hey, hold on. Come on, walk out here with me. And he explained to him in his terms, in his deal, what that meant. And the guy comes back the next day and the next day, but it's so overwhelming technology and terminology. And it's not like Monique and I are going to say, this is what we need to do as a college, and this is what our students look like. Everyone in this room has been involved with this college for years. We've been doing incarceration work as a college. I took this job over from Salamena that was doing it in the early 80s. We've had an incarceration program that was called the Pinto program back in the 80s before anyone in California ever even heard of a program. We've been doing the work underground, and now it's blossoming because we're in a political time and we have a college president that gets it, and we have vice presidents that get it, and we have college leadership and deans that understand that this is community college and we have to educate our community or we're not going to make it. So it's frontline service. And, you know, it was interesting. I went to a restaurant the other day and I'm standing waiting for my food. And there was a Fresno State pamphlet on this thing where people put their business cards. And I pulled it, and it was a one-page pamphlet. And on that pamphlet, it said, Fresno State students, are you homeless? This is our program. Have you been incarcerated? This is our program. Are you hungry? This is the RAM Pantry. And they had 20 resources on this one page in this restaurant. And I looked at it and I thought, how brilliant is that? That this is in a restaurant that I frequent that's not even close to Fresno State. And I read it and I thought, you know, this is our frontline staff, our custodial staff, our grounds, our people that are in the trenches every single day trying to knock it out. If they had we just look at it and say, okay, you're hungry. This is the prime pantry. This is who runs it. This is their hours. You know, it's, hey man, I noticed you've been wearing those same shoes every single day and they don't look so good. Have you ever heard of Catholic Charities? And can I hook you up? Let me make a phone call. Let's get you another pair of pants. Let's make the phone call. Do you know that we have a full closet of clothing on campus? That some of it has come from Gottschalk's and is beautiful stuff. And they have never turned me away. And it may have only been for certain women when we've called and just said, hey, I got this guy has an interview, man. He needs a pair of pants. He needs some shoes. He needs something. Never have they turned it away. Even they know they're going to break the rules. They do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's what the staff at Fresno City College does. And that's the pride of it. It all comes down to service industry. Service is just like, and in front of my building, when I walk into it, I'm proud that it says student services. It doesn't say student processing. It just doesn't say, it says student services. We're here to serve. So how do we serve when you're at that desk? You're at the School of Business. You're at the Health, Arts, and Science. You're in our humanities division, and the student walks in and you just think, oh man, what do I got? And when they reach out to you, it's when we serve them, they come back tomorrow. And yeah, the services that we're providing, the other over and above stuff, like she said, the RAM Pantry, that's awesome. And our RAM Pantry, it didn't start from the top up. It didn't start by a president saying we're going to do it. It started because students said they were hungry, and it was a grassroots effort. In fact, there's some people in this session today that were on the ground floor of that RAM Pantry because students were saying that they're hungry and made it start. It didn't start because the president of the college saw something. It started from ground roots and it came up. And now that we see what it's become, it's incredible. And the same with, you know, like the Rising Scholars Program. We have a counselor. We have an academic counselor in Rising Scholars that is going to have an office. He's going to have the ability to help a student, not in a cubicle where everyone can sit, where you can have like a real conversation. Hugo's gonna be able to have real conversations with students about, hey, does that major make sense? You got 3 felonies on identity theft. You're not gonna go to work for Bank of America. I'm sorry. But we have to have those conversations. Sometimes the reality of the conversations we have are very difficult. You know, and I'm completely blown away what my students look like, because half the student population that comes into me, I almost fall out of my chair when they tell me, oh yeah, I'm incarcerated. And a lot of times I'll say, well, who's your agent? What unit are you in? All that techie stuff. And they'll tell me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I know that agent. They only deal with, you know, extreme risks, people that are just getting out. So sometimes by just telling me who they're seeing, it tells you who they are, you know, and you're like, oh geez, okay, we got to get this. So it's the services have become a big deal. Technology divide with formerly incarcerated students is greater than the average student that walks on campus. They're not having a complete understanding of, try to take someone that's been incarcerated for 10 years or they just got out and explain to them what the cloud means. Give that a go. Explain that. That's like going home and trying to tell grandma and grandpa that are old school, grown up in Jalisco, they're back here, and you're going to tell grandma what the cloud is. Let me know what that conversation looks like for you, because I know what it looked like at my house when I tried to explain to them what some of this stuff I was learning. And they look at me like, what? What is that? You know, what are you doing? So the technology divide within our campus community is pretty large. And I know, Monique, you're much better at that than I am. What are some of the things that you're seeing as far as when it comes down to the techie part of it?
Yeah, so I think it's just as Mark mentioned, we often forget that a lot of the technology things that we now utilize happen within the last like 10, 15, 20, even, 15 years type of a thing. And so, Mark mentioned early on that a lot of the students that we're seeing are no longer students who were only incarcerated for a couple of years. Students are coming out, and these are students who were incarcerated at 15, 20 years. And so they skip that whole digital influence. Then starting off with MySpace, or even before with the AOL old messages, they skipped all of that, and they struggle a lot to even navigate through their smartphone. And so when we talk to them about that's been starting college, right now with the pandemic, that's been the greatest struggle. I have close to 10 potential students who refuse to start right now because they have no idea how to navigate what Canvas is, how to even start to do class online. They don't, of course, own a laptop or any of that. And although we have resources for those things, the idea of starting off school, having to do it online is something that they don't even want to explore. They don't even want to touch. Because they've been gone for so much that it's a lot more difficult for them to navigate through these things. And so when they talk about, oh, having to access Canvas for your assignments and, and go ahead and submit it this way and that way, that's things that, is going over their heads. We had a student before the pandemic happened, we had a student who was a part of the club, all of a sudden an amazing student. And he's part of Rising Scholars as well. And so, he hadn't worked in close to 15 years. And so I talked to them about the possibility of work study. They were awarded financially the work study through federal work study. And because I already had some connections with people on campus, I was able to connect this person to building services, and they were able to start as a student aide in building services. Whether you're a student aide or not, there are, process with HR that you have to complete. So online, there's certain, things that you have to do online, certain forms you have to come in. This person came and was like, look, I thank you, but I don't want this job. And I was like, wait, why not? Like, this is great. And you're able to kind of build that experience. And it was kind of, going back to like some things that Mark had mentioned, it was just like that whole idea, like, I have no idea what a W-9 is. I have no idea what I'm supposed to fill out. I have no idea what I'm supposed to write, what I'm supposed to do, how to access these things. And so, I took time during my lunch, like, okay, let's set this appointment. I sat the student down in my cubicle in my office and let them log on and was like, okay, let's work through this together. And I explained what the different forms were for and what he needed to do. And I helped him out and all of that. And so, that student started off as a student aide and is now actually a full-time employee with building services, because they were doing such an amazing job that when that position opened up, even the supervisors recommended that he go ahead and apply. And again, that student would have even gotten there to this full-time job that is offering him so many freedoms and other benefits because of that one thing of having to fill out all the paperwork online. And so when we talk about, front door services that Mark was talking about, it's having to be understanding and again, equity is such a big term right now, and having to meet student where they're at. And so a lot of that time, that means having to go through the very basics of technology, and letting the student know what a thumb drive is, what is the cloud, how to access Canvas, things of that sort. And a lot of times we think like, well, this is the basic that people should know, but it was like, people don't have cell phones, and well, people don't have this type of technology in prisons. They don't have tablets, and these types of things in there. So again, if they haven't been exposed to it, then how are they going to know? And so I did want to touch on a little bit of these programs to also offer a little bit of more information and kind of the benefits that they provide. And so, you know, shout out to Rising Scholars for putting on this amazing symposium and, you know, the being able to get this information out, because it's important for people to get it. It's important for them to know. And so, you know, continue to utilizing Rising Scholars and sending students over there to kind of help them get started. Grand Pantry is not only someplace students can start with, you know, getting groceries, but they also help students with applications for CalFresh as well. So, you know, if you feel like a student can benefit from that and they don't have those services as well, that's something else that Grand Pantry helps out with, is kind of getting them on those services, or at least helping them with the applications to see if they qualify. Hope is from my understanding, a new program here on campus that has really done an amazing job helping students that need housing or that are homeless. So those are some of the big services that they offer. If you know of any student that's having any type of housing issues, is currently homeless. And in addition to that, substance abuse as well. And so that's something that unfortunately a lot of students struggle with. And with the pandemic, it's kind of heightened that a little bit more. And so Hope is a great place here on campus to kind of get started with that. And then kind of other programs, EOP, CalWORKs, the Dream Center. Mark and I, when we were talking about this presentation, something that we were talking about is a lot of times in the elementary school, you know, with the whole school to prison pipeline, students have learning disabilities that are never tested. They kind of get dismissed as that student is just hyperactive. You know, that student just has behavioral issues. That student just doesn't want to learn. And early on, they really dismissed a lot of these learning disabilities that students have. And when they're not taken serious in school, when they don't have that support in school at this young age and teenage years, that's when, you know, they start kind of getting in trouble a little bit more. And end up on paths that lead them to incarceration. And so, of course, while they're incarcerated, there's no talks of learning disabilities and getting a lot of individuals tested. And so when they come out and they start going to college and they start doing poorly in some classes, it kind of reaffirms that idea that they had, that they don't belong here. You know, and I've had a lot of students that I've met with, and, you know, when I check in on them and like, how are you doing? How's your semester going? You know what? This school isn't for me. You know, I tried, and I thank you for your help, but I tried. But you know what? At this math class, I didn't understand any of it. Completely failed. These English classes, I can't write these papers. And so, in talking to them and kind of talking about what their struggles are, let them know like, hey, you know, let me walk you over to DSPNS. And, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions already tied to that program. Like, what? Like, I'm not disabled. Like, what? That's not for me, you know? And so it's important to start breaking things down for them. Like, no. Like, you know, like, here's some of the services that they can help you with, you know, and maybe you just need a little bit more help. Maybe someone else can take notes for you and that'll help you so that you can focus on the lecture, whatever the case is. But getting them comfortable and getting them to see that it's okay, you know, that there are a lot of people, professional people on campus who have learning disabilities as well. One of our academic counselors in CalWORKs shares with students like, I'm dyslexic. And I thought the whole time I was just too dumb for college until I got the help that I needed. And then I was able to succeed. And so I think that the DSPNS has been extremely, extremely helpful in keeping a lot of students here on campus. You know, once they learn that, you know, it's not that they were dumb or it's not that they just, you know, couldn't get it. It's like, hey, you just needed a little extra help. That's it. And so again, that's another reason why it's extremely important to not only know these programs, but have certain contact people in these programs so that way, you know, if there's a student who's really hesitant, like, no, I really don't want to go in there, and be like, no, let me go ahead and just introduce you to my friend really quick. Hey, you know, they mentioned they're having some difficult times in these classes, and then go see about getting tested then. And then even out in the community, there's this Making Connections. It's an amazing book that I know some people on campus have access to, that has just an abundance of information and resources in there, from even transportation to housing, to a bunch of other things within the Fresno County area. because we understand that sometimes students need more services than what the campus is even able to offer. And so at that point, we go ahead and connect them to our community resources so they can get whatever it is that they need to do. Because I'm sure we understand that being successful academically means having to take care of other issues that are not academic related. And so one thing also that's been extremely useful for me and it's been a good tool for me to be able to use my students in the club, All of Us or None, is a roadmap to reentry that's offered through Root and Rebound. I do believe there's like about a $20 fee or so for that, but it's just such an amazing resource. And so if you're somebody on campus who, like Mark and myself, who does tend to, run into and work a lot with formerly incarcerated students, or it's just students in general that have been impacted by the justice system, that roadmap to reentry really, really helps. Because sometimes we've had students, Mark, we've had students that get out and have been incarcerated so long that are like, I don't have my birth certificate, my social security, I have no form of ID. I have a friend who got caught in a hole of, he was trying to apply for jobs, but he wasn't successful because he didn't have a phone on him, and he doesn't have a job because, again, he's trying to apply for jobs, so he's not able to afford a phone. So we went ahead and told him, why don't you go ahead and get a government phone? Well, he can't get a government phone because he needs identification to be able to get the government phone. He's not able to get identifications because he needs a copy of his birth certificate. But in order to order his birth certificate, he has to get a notarized document and pay a fee. So now you're talking about having to get a hold of a notary, having to come up with the money to pay for a fee, just to fill out a form to get a birth certificate, to be able to then get an ID, to be able to then get a phone, to be able to be a little more successful when going out to job hunting. And so this is a constant circle of just barriers that a lot of our students face, especially those that have been incarcerated for more than 10 years. It's a serious issue. And so having that information of like, okay, here's how you can get started. Okay, here's some, notaries that, can help with this type of situation. So, okay, here are these other things that you can do, has been extremely, extremely helpful for students that kind of get caught up in that.
Yeah, and one of the points, it's just a Fresno City College resource manual. I'm sitting in my office and I look across and there's this emergency procedures thing with these little clip deals. Now, this has probably been in my office, well, since 2008. So, but something along those lines that I don't have to open up a big book and say, okay, food insecurities, things that our campus offered is just such a need, whether it be a flip chart or just something. So when I walk into your office, you don't have to be embarrassed. You know who that person is or who to call or who goes to DSPS or what is it that CalWORKs does. Just little things, a roadmap to success for our students that we could be doing as an institution to help would be just an amazing thing. And one of the chats that just came in, I'm looking, and someone from Focus Forward wanted to be on that. And I'm sitting here and I get this smile on my face and think, man, Focus Forward. Here's a group of people that are working for system impacted juveniles, kids that are coming out of juvenile hall. They're coming out, they've got all kinds of stuff, and they're trying to save them from not going to Pelican Bay, not to go to the next level, to give them the pipeline to Fresno City College. And we have people here working in that. And there's probably a half a dozen of us on campus that even understands what Focus Forward is and what they do and their mission. So as soon as I read that and I think, how is it that we don't have Focus Forward on that? How is it we don't have Fresno Metro Ministries? These partnerships that we've developed on campus to help students. And we have the largest foster youth program in the state of California parked on our campus called Next Up CAFES. The largest, one of the most incredibly run programs in the state of California that 98% of our staff would have no idea if someone came in and said, I've been impacted by the foster youth program. How do I get help?
Interpreter missed a phrase. You said that was called
CAFES.
that one.
Yeah, it's CAFES, CAFYES, and it's next up, and it's housed in EOPS. But it's there's so many great programs on this campus that because we're so busy that we don't know. I know people. I say, hey, that's my girl Monique. She works over in CalWORKs, but I could no longer tell you what she does, then I could fly. Or, hey, that's my friend Franklin. She's over there in humanities. Let me see if I can pick up the phone. But there's so many resources within our community that there's become this need. And it's, like I said, the front row, the front service, the how do I attach myself? It's remarkable to see. And then a great thing happened to me this morning when I come in. I'm walking into the office. I want to get here early, and I'm standing out in the front, and Dean Henderson shows up. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Pimentel shows up, and we're having this conversation. This kid runs upstairs, and he's knocking on the door. So Dr. Pimentel says, hey, because of the pandemic, we're closed, and this is what's going on. How can I help you? The guy says, well, I'm trying to get a hold of counseling. And he says, well, do you have access to a computer? Do you understand how to do that? And he says, no, I don't know how to get my password. I don't know how to do things. I'm kind of lost. Dr. Pimentel says, you know what? Come with me. He took the student. He took him. And I thought, that's my vice president that just did that. That's not just some guy that come walking around. He didn't shake the kid's hand and say, oh, I'm Vice President Robert Pimentel. I'm Dr. da-da-da-da. He recognized that this young man had no clue. And he was not going to front him up and say, I'm Dr. blah, blah, blah. I'm a guy that works here that cares about you as a human being. Come to my office. So this kid must have tripped when he went upstairs and went into the vice president's office to get help. But that's the frontline service that started at the top of the tree. And it was just awesome to see. And that's the kind of things that happen here every day. And it's just getting the resources and getting to the right person. Because the fastest way to get rid of a student that makes us uncomfortable is to give them extension. You know what? Call CalWORKs. Here's our extension. And then we act like we've done this great thing and we helped them by giving it to them. No, we didn't help them. We got rid of them. We curbed them. But it's the service and how are we going to present it and how are we going to make them. And I don't care if you've been incarcerated. I don't care. I mean, none of that matters to us here. It's just everybody's important or nobody's important. So it's just that student that's been incarcerated is just as important to me as anyone that walks in the front door and scared. Because when I serve them, I'm going to get 10 members of their family and they're going to know. And then we don't have to worry about equity. We don't have to worry about how many African-American students we have, how many this one we have, how many green, blue, purple, yellow, orange ones we have. Everyone gets treated in an equitable manner. Everyone gets treated with equity and equitable in the same. And it comes down to that service. It comes down to community resources and how do we get a kid a pair of shoes? How do we get a former foster youth that's scared to death? He's had 28 placements. Our students have 28 foster placements that come here and they need help. And for everyone should know. So you know what? I think there's this guy over there's this lady on EOPS, Veronica, but to get them there. And how do we get them there and how do we walk them there? And, and then some of my favorite students I like to help are my students that are on parole. Parole's not always a bad thing. I've seen parole save students' lives more than you can ever imagine because they're held accountable. They're not going to go drinking with their buddy because they're afraid that because if the agent comes by, they're in trouble. So it gives them an excuse to get out of trouble sometimes. They get agents. And I cannot tell you how many times a parole agent has called me and said, Mark, I'm working with this young lady and she is special. And all she needs is the courage to come to college. Can you talk to her? I've seen agents physically drive students to our campus to help. I've seen people that have had CalWORKs cases where they've physically brought them down. CPS, I've had CPS workers physically bring students into us to say, this person is an incredible individual that just needs a break. So we have community partners that bring us students all the time that want to help us. And how do they get to us? And it's just come to, how do we give them the resources? How do we give them the front door service? And, you know, I mean, we don't have at some of our underlying campuses. Is Reedley doing the same thing? No. Is Clovis doing the same thing? No. Is Oakers, Madera, it always comes down to, is there an individual on that campus that's incarcerated minded, that knows what it is? And then unfortunately, sometimes there's not. Rising Scholars, we were one of the 50 campuses that got blessed enough to get money. And now we're trying to find money to keep this train rolling. And everyone in this room knows what grant funding, when they hear we got a grant. We all shake our head and say the same thing. Oh, no, don't tell me grant, because when it goes away, what does that mean? Are we going to be left holding the bag again, or is it going to keep going? And we're lucky enough to have a college president that says, yes, we're going to keep this thing going. So like I say, I was telling these guys at the beginning, Mark doesn't need an introduction, he needs a conclusion. So I guess I truly, Luis is back on there, so it's telling me we're probably the question and answers. You want to jump in there, my brother?
Yeah, we just had a quick question from Gloria. She stated that this presentation is actually open to all schools or all campuses in the Central Community College District. And she wanted to know, what can those campuses that don't have that program, that don't have this program, Rising Scholars program, do for their campus? What kind of recommendations do you have for them?
Yeah. So I think, we touched a little bit on that. Before I kind of dive really into the question, I just want to say I went ahead and included Mark and myself's emails on here. Mark's been here a lot longer than I have, but both him and I have been in the last few years working, with All of Us or None and other students who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. So if you ever have any questions, concerns, if you want to continue the conversation, or even if you want somebody or need somebody to be able to introduce a student to so that they feel connected, go ahead and reach out. I'm always more than happy to help. So, and then kind of getting into the question as far as what these other campuses can do. So, we were doing the work before, Rising Scholars was something that was able to happen here on campus. And so I think when you talk about where do I start, I think it's important to just starting with understanding whether it be an organization that you're working in or whether it be a campus that you're at, it's just understanding what resources are on this campus. What resources do I have available, so that whenever the need comes up, whether it be a student that is formerly incarcerated or just another student in general who needs assistance with housing, who needs assistance, with, food or whatever the case is, that you're at least familiar with some people on your campus to be able to connect the student to. So I think that's a good starting point, is just kind of familiarize yourself with what's available to you. And then, there's nothing wrong with telling students, let me look into that. I don't know, but let me check in to that. So even if there is a resources that you have no idea who to connect the student to or where to even start or whatever the case is, you have two starting points here. You have Mark and you have myself from whatever campus that you're on as well, to be like, hey, I have this student, this is kind of the issue that they're running into, and I have no idea where to even start. And then we can kind of take it from there, okay, well, what do we have that's available to us? Who can we connect you to? And then take it from there.
Well, and all 117 California community colleges have an EOPS office. I've never been on a college campus that didn't have a DSPS office. We are a very odd duck that we have a CalWORKs campus on our campus. That's kind of unheard of in the state. But so one of the first things I would do if I was on a campus, if I was Reedley, Madera, any of the campuses, and I didn't know how to serve them, one of the first things I would do is probably walk them into the EOPS, because they're going to have a little bit more of an understanding of an extreme risk student or what it is to be poor and resources. And if they did nothing more than just be the pipeline to get them to the right answer or get them to an area on campus to find the answer, that would be great. And like I said, each campus is going to be completely different. So, I mean, we've been running I've been doing incarceration out of this program. It got handed to me 15 years ago, and Sal had it, God rest his soul, 15 years ago. So we've literally, for 30 years, we've had an incarceration program on this campus of helping students. But we're it. Clovis doesn't have it, Reedley doesn't have it, Madera doesn't have it, Rising Scholars. I mean, it'll eventually find its way there. But right now, it's kind of us. And I know that's not a great answer, but if it were me sending a student, if someone was walking into Clovis and didn't know, I would send them either to EOPS or DSPS, because they deal with the populations that have the highest amount of needs and that probably need more resources, and they would have an understanding what the resources are.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I don't know if there's any other questions or if anyone else has any other questions. I know we still have about 10 or 15 minutes left, so enough time if anyone else had any other questions. Not all at once.
Well, I would, one of the resources that Monique spoke on, I want to hit it again, is, the HOPE program for housing insecurities. We understand that the housing insecurities are great on campus, but one of the things that they're also doing is, then we touched on, was the substance abuse treatment. And one of the big issues we've had as a college is when someone needed to they were having an issue, to try to get them help. Because one of the first things they would say, well, who is the referring agency? Do you have insurance? Do you have all of these things that they don't have, that they weren't able to do? And now that the college has an agreement with WestCare, which we can get them help and not have to worry about their insurance, not have to worry about things. And a lot of times the students I'm seeing, they have been through a program and they need a tune-up. They need to get to a meeting. They need to get to a crisis. They have something going on that may not require an inpatient service where they're going to have to be there and detox and do all this stuff. It might be just nothing more than, I need a friendly face. I need a tune-up. I'm having these issues again. How do I stop them? And we now have that. That's a huge service. So, I mean, but again, it comes down to the people that need to know that some of the information doesn't start from the top and come down. There's a lot of stuff that, yes, a lot of our deans are aware of, a lot of the bosses are aware of, but they're busy people. You're a dean on this campus, you're working, you are in 800 meetings, there's something going on every minute. They don't get to see a lot of students because they're so jammed up doing the everyday running the ship stuff, that a lot of the other the people that are in the trenches don't get the information. So it comes down to that, getting the information. I saw a hand up.
Yeah, Mark,
Yeah,
Ernie
so
has a
Ernie.
question.
So my question would be, what do you recommend we do if a student comes to us and says, they think their instructor is, maybe found out about their past and is treating them differently, either in the classroom or through grading? What do you recommend we do in that situation?
Man, I'd like to tell you that doesn't happen, but it does. And I've had it more times than I can tell you. Have I run into a situation where I had a student that had to write an essay, and the essay had to do with something about their life experiences. And this guy wrote one of the darkest essays. It was a bit of a shocker. And he took it in to have one of the services on campus, like reading, writing, preview it and took a look at it, and it was just like, whoa, 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 this is alarming. Where it then went to the dean, and we had this whole thing going on. Our staff, because we've been in business for over 100 years, our instructors having an incarcerated student in their classroom is not a new thing. If you're not a part-time instructor and you're a full-time instructor at Fresno City College, you have been teaching incarcerated students since the day you started here. And a lot of that comes down to mentorship with the dean, and it comes to mentorship with the instructor to instructor saying, these are the situations you're going to run into. This is how we do it. And we have an incredible, I mean, the first step always is to inform your dean. The dean has to know, and then or the department chair, and let it go. The worst thing that happens is someone wants to run to the college president or run to the very top of the thing without following any kind of chain of command. And it starts at the dean level, or it starts with that chair level to say, hey, this is what's going on. And normally the dean can head it up at the pass immediately and get it taken care of. And yes, there's going to be bias. Ernie, you're dead on. There's going to be, once you find out that I just come out of a triple life sentence, your grade book may get different with me. And, you know, I've had some instances where some of students have come in and have had incredibly culturally insensitive tattoos, where someone's just got has the Nazi thing there and white pride and all kinds of crazy stuff. And he's going to sit in a form hall class and make everybody in the class look over and say, this guy stands for everything in the world that I'm 100% against. How is it I got to sit next to him? And, you know, one of the issues we've had on campus is some of our students, you're coming out of a system that is the most racist system. There's nothing more racist than a prison system. When I show up to a prison yard, I know where I have to go. I look for my people and I have to go there because I can't go to the other side. And all of a sudden, you've been in that incarcerated for 10 years and I put you in the form hall class and you're surrounded by people that you've been told the entire time you're incarcerated you can't play with, and now you got to ask them questions. It becomes very sensitive. And yeah, sometimes some of our students will come walking in and you look at it and you say, oh, wow, I'm going to the other side of the room. I don't want to sit next to this guy. And yes, our instructor, staff, they also want to be safe. We're taught from a very young age to look around, look at your surroundings and be safe, be in that safe mode. And when someone comes into our office or into our classroom that makes us feel that uneasy, it's a very difficult discussion. But like I said, we've been in this business for over 100 years. We've been serving incarcerated since the day we opened the doors. Our seasoned instructors know better than anyone else how to deal with those situations. And the mentorship that has to take place between a brand new instructor and an instructor that's been here for 30 years, it starts there, and it starts with a dean. And when you have those issues, it starts with the chain of command of meeting with that dean, the dean meeting with his VP, the VP are due fill out a student complaint. Sean Henderson in the student services has a understanding. He's been working with formerly incarcerated students probably more than anyone else on this campus. Incredible human being. And it starts there for him to educate the staff and the deans and everyone else that, hey, this is what's happening. But I'd love to tell you, Ernie, that doesn't happen, but yes, it does. But it also happens to me being an African-American male, being the only African-American male that sits in a class and everyone looks at me. I'm in a calculus class and everyone looks at me and says, what are you doing here? Why are you in this class? Acting like I don't belong because of the color of my skin. That also happens on our campus. And I'd love to tell you I got this magic wand that's going to fix it, but we're not.
Yeah, I've had to talk to students about, the whole grievance process on campus and let them know that is something that they have the right to do. Going back to what Mark was mentioning, we'd love to say that our campus, that does not happen. But unfortunately, although we have some amazing people here, there are still a few people that, have challenging personalities. that do sometimes hold biases and do treat students, differently based on just multiple things. And so I think that one of the things also to kind of start with that if that is something that a student unfortunately faces is letting them know that that's not something that is a norm, and that's not something that they have to put up with. A lot of the times people get used to just being mistreated. They just get used to being talked to a certain way, to, and usually talked down to just being pushed around. And it's like, you can't question authority, or else you're just going to get into even more trouble. And a lot of times people have been, incarcerated for so long, and then when they get out, they just want to keep the peace. Like, I'm not trying to provoke anything. I'm not trying to start anything. I don't want to, make a situation worse, because I just want to avoid the trouble. And they often assume that if someone's going to be punished in any type of way, that it's going to be them, because that's how things have been going on in the past, that every time something happens is they're the ones that are looked to. They're the troublemaker. They are then the ones that are being punished. And so then they talk about having to approach a situation between me and, a professor and someone who's been here for maybe a couple of years, and somebody, who's more, higher up status. Like, they're like, no, I don't want to mess with that, because it's just going to end up worse for me. So I think that in addition to everything that Mark said, and, kind of going to the deans, and it starts with that mentorship, I think it also involves a conversation with the student and letting them know, like, no, this isn't the norm. This isn't something that you have to put up with. And there are things that we can do to fix the situation, and there was a question in here that talked about like addressing this whole, it was kind of related to that, and overcoming this, formerly incarcerated students and biases within departments and instructors, and what can be done, because a lot of times, unfortunately, these students are not part of a protected, population. And I think that it's important to start off with events like this, symposiums like this, where people are able to get information, to really get it. Because I think that if we want to have a campus that's truly welcoming, then we need to first set that environment, and set that environment that discrimination, regardless of a student's, ethnicity, religion, or even whether or not they've been incarcerated before, is not tolerated on this campus, is not accepted. And if you as an individual have any issues working with any of these populations, then this is not a job for you. This is not an environment for you. You can apply somewhere else, type of a thing. So I think it starts first with creating that environment, and in having, again, events like this, and creating partnerships, and making things less exclusive. And once we create that environment, then it's easier to kind of, I don't want to use the word push out, but in a sense, push out people that are not going to be welcoming to all students, regardless of their background. So thank you for that question.
There was a few more comments. One of them was from Angela Jones. She wanted to mention about the Next Up program. She left the resources and what the program is intended for in the chat. Susie just included another link for the second session. I'm sorry, I don't know what number this is, but after this one.
Yes.
And I will right now put the evaluation link in the chat as well. And if anyone else has some other question, we have 2 minutes left before it closes.
Yeah, we do have a female panel coming up. And so I do encourage you guys to attend that. I know that when we often talk about, formerly incarcerated students and, issues with, system impacted students, the attention tends to go towards males, because, they are the ones that are more predominantly impacted, but they're not the only ones that are impacted. There's a lot of female students who have had to go through the system as well, who have had to face different challenges as well. And so I know that in my experience, and in kind of talking to the students and what their experiences are, my experience as a female when I was much younger and being incarcerated was completely different than a lot of the experiences that these male students have had to have. So check it out. It'll be good to kind of gain a different perspective.
And to answer Angela's question, the Next Up program for current and former foster youth Like I say, it's one of the largest programs in the state of California. They do services where they can be giving them help with auto repairs. They can be helping doing assistance with food, just everything that EOPS does to help a student. The Next Step program accelerates at 100%. So, I mean, whether it be textbooks, supplies, intrusive counseling, making sure that they're getting the appropriate classes, getting here on time, giving them the safety net. And it's not always about monetary things like, oh, we're going to give them this money, or hey, we're a book program. No, what it is intended to do is to take current and former foster youth and give them the direction that they probably haven't gotten ever, into maneuvering their way through a crazy college system to graduate, and then giving them resources along the way, whether it be emotional support, financial support, helping with their car, whatever the wraparound service has to be is what they're trying to do. And it is being done at the highest level I've ever seen in my 35 years at City College. To have the largest foster youth population in the state of California getting services with such a small staff is incredible. And then that staff, when we poll those current and former foster youth, the amount of incarceration in that group is higher than any other group we have on campus. The system impacted a lot of them. These students that are in that program, they were forcefully removed from their home. And it wasn't because their parents were doing great things. So a lot of times that would put them in the system is incarceration. It wasn't their incarceration. It was someone in the immediate family or something that happened to them that put them in. So the two programs really go hand in hand as far as who's being impacted. And it just happens to be that we're lucky enough to have a Rising Scholars program and a Next Up program and a CalWORKs program and a DSPS and a veterans and all of these forces to help students become successful in what they're trying to do.
So I think that's our time. Not sure if we have any other questions, but I just want to thank you guys again for being here and for listening to Mark and I. Thank you, Mark, also for doing this presentation with me. I love working with Mark. I've worked with him for the last few years, and so one of my favorite people on campus. But generally, thank you guys for being here and being willing to learn and being willing to grow, because all of this helps our students. And it helps in not only the services that we provide to them, but making sure that they're just that much more successful when attending classes on our campus. So thank you guys also for just being here.
Yeah, this was what a great experience it's been. I appreciate everyone. I even got a haircut for the event, and I'm not in sweats. And the commute down the hallway today was a lot easier. So yeah, I got back to the uptight haircut, so I'm ready. But thanks all. Appreciate you.
Hey, thank you guys.